The City of Philadelphia's Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy presents Arts Access TV, an opportunity for all to view creative performances and programs from Philadelphia's diverse pool of local artists and arts organizations. Tune in weekly to Arts Access TV and discover Philadelphia's extraordinary creative community that will leave you wanting to see and hear more. I invite you now to sit back and enjoy.
everyone. Thanks for listening to Artblog Radio. I'm Roberta Fallon. I'm your host today, and today I'm very excited to be talking with Jodi Throckmorton, Curator of Contemporary Art at Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and Brittany Webb, Curator, Dr. Brittany Webb, Evelyn and Will Kaplan, Curator of 20th Century Art and the John Roden Collection. So welcome both of you, ladies. I'm very eager to hear about your new show. So we're here to talk about Taking Space, which opens November 19th at PAFA. We're going to call Pennsylvania Academy PAFA. It's kind of nickname because it's quicker. The full title of the show is Taking Space, Contemporary Women Artists and the Politics of Scale. And it presents art from the museum's permanent collection. And it's a very large show. There's 52 names. I don't know how many pieces of art by these women, but it's a very, very large show in the Fisher Brooks Gallery, which is a very large space to fill. So I'm looking forward to seeing this when it opens. And it's about, well, it has the word politics in the title and scale and women. And I want to get into all those three things because I think they're very important. Have always been, and it's really good to talk about women in the context of politics and space. So the show was co-curated by Jodi and Brittany, and the works deal with the female body, size, scale, repetition, and these are, the curators are arguing, signifiers of politics. So I want to hear first about your curation. Curating, generally speaking, I think is a singular event in a person's life. There aren't a lot of co-curated shows. So what was it like to co-curate, and why did you do this as a co-curation? And I don't know who wants to start out here, and I don't have any preference.
I can start if that's okay. And it's kind of funny because we haven't talked. I mean, there's been a few texts back and forth where we've talked about what it's like to work together, but I think this is the first time. So we may completely disagree with each other. I don't know, but
that'd be great.
Me, it's been amazing. I mean, it's kind of, I think the worst nightmare of working together is that it won't work. You won't be able to work together. And that, at least for me, has not been the case. I think that we each have strengths that we bring, and they're different. Some are the same strengths and some are different, different time periods, different types of artists. And that has been really helpful. And I will push back just a tiny bit on the collaborative question about curatorial work being singular or whatever. And that's certainly, I've done a lot of that at PAFA, but there's a lot that happens between the three curators at PAFA that's I think more collaborative than other institutions, because we're really interested in smushing time periods together, I guess, to say. So, Dr. Anna Marley is our historic American art curator. And so it's not uncommon at PAFA for, things from the 19th century to be paired with things from the 20th century and the 21st century. So that's been really wonderful to do that at the institution. And then I think that same spirit has really carried through in our partnership. Brittany?
Yeah, I think I'm echoing Jodi's sentiments that we always sort of feel like this work is a team sport, even when everyone doesn't get credit for their contributions. So what's been nice about our collaboration with this exhibition, I think, is some of the conversations we've had where we've talked about how and where works fit, or why something doesn't really fit. There were several iterations of the checklist where we sort of kicked ideas around back and forth. And it's sort of nice to have so many of these processes be outside of one's own head. It's nice to have the multiple perspectives, the different ways of seeing a thing. Jodi has been at PAFA longer than I have. So even thinking about, other histories that we aren't aware of in terms of the object's history with the institution, or thinking about other places where we've seen these artists discussed, I think that there's just been more sort of more information, more conversation than there would be if it was just one person. And I feel like that's really enriched the project. In addition to the fact that, you have two sets of eyes, you have two sets of hands. There's some work that we actually can kind of divide and conquer in a way that's really productive.
That's true
Cool.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, talking about the different time periods, Jodi, the way you mentioned, sometimes you have things from the 21st century along with the 19th century together. It seems to me in this show you have mixed up 20th and 21st century. So there's everything from the Guerrilla Girls, who, well, they started in the 60s, I believe, and Barbara Kruger and, Anna Mendieta, who was even in the 50s, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then we have Emily Brown, contemporary artist working today, and, Deborah Willis and Michelina Thomas. And so it's all mixed in. It makes it very meaty that you throw things together from different time periods and don't just have it so narrow that you sort of cut off your nose to spite your face,
I hope so. I hope that's how people feel. And we could have even, originally when the show started, we were back in abstract expressionism. Because there are some great examples, and a few did end up in the show, actually. We have a great Lee Krasner, for example, in the show, Nora Jaffe. But we ended up kind of moving that date a little forward because there was so much that we wanted to include. And believe it or not, the show's actually expanded beyond Fisher Brooks as well.
Oh, wow.
It's now upstairs in our beautiful Tuttleman sculpture gallery with the wonderful windows, and it's also in the School of Fine Arts gallery around the stairs. So we've taken up more space, I guess, at PAPA too, which is really great.
So yeah, let's talk about that term, because as I was thinking about it, it used to be we would say in a negative way, you're just taking up space. And now I want to say the term has a different connotation, which is positive. Taking space is like seizing space, right? So talk about that. And I'm sure that you proactively chose that term for the show.
And Brittany, do you want to take this one? Because really the core work is this Deb Willis work that I think sets off that term quite well.
Yeah, I do think we were really intentional about like this. Thank you for the word seizing. There's a way that in conversations around what we called the show, we talked about imagery of this kind of taking, the claiming. For a while, I think we were thinking about scale both as noun and a verb, sort of like this idea of women scaling some of these giant mountains, whether that's the mountain of art history, trying to master a particular kind of technique or material. But also there's this really lovely Deb Willis image that is the core of the show, that's a lithograph that I can actually pull up for us because I think it's just really lovely to think with. And it features this work that is called "I Made Space for a Good Man," but the way that work is sort of set up, you have this serial images, these three self-portraits of Deb Willis as a young pregnant artist. And it's framed by these words, a woman taking space from a good man. This quote, "You took the space from a good man." And the final image, "I made a space for a good man." And it's drawn from her experiences as an art student in Philadelphia, being told by a male professor, that it was a shame that she was in his class, that she was just taking up space that could have gone to a good male artist. This idea that because she was a woman, she was going to get married, she was going to have children, that was going to preclude her from having a kind of arts career. And even just that kind of thinking, that sort of fantasy of a future that hadn't even arrived yet, was enough that this professor decided that she didn't even deserve a space in the classroom or a space in an art program. and even thinking about both the physicality of that and the sort of the idea of denying a young woman even the dream space, like the idea to have the space of her mind to imagine a particular kind of future, really kind of that sat with us in a way that it's sort of a touchstone or an anchor to think about all of the ways that women artists, in terms of medium, in terms of demanding space in a classroom or in a program or in a studio or in a conversation, is a great sort of rallying cry for this exhibition, to think about how, you know, it's very political to hold that story and to have a kind of career and to reclaim that in her artwork. And she also, you know, in this image, she's reclining and she's pregnant with Hank Willis Thomas, who also went on to become a celebrated American artist. So there's a lot there's so rich about this work, and that's rich in the show. So to think about what it is to take up space, the fact that in some cases does have a negative connotation, but there are a lot of ways that I think the artists in this exhibition have really flipped that, and claimed a lot of space and taken up a lot of space in a way that is intellectually productive and also visually stunning.
Yeah, and I mean, where would we be if Deb Willis took that as a, you know, she got this comment, negative comment, done, instead of a charge, really, like, okay, well, now I'm, you know, where would we be in art history without her scholarship? Think about all the art, all the photographs that we'd be missing out on. And you know, we'd be in a very different place, I think, without Deb Willis. So thankfully she did take it as a charge, and I think that's something that unites the artists in the show. It's that charge to claim space.
Yeah, so let's talk more about the show and who's in the show, because it seems to me that there are artists like Deb Willis who overtly take space and use the concept of empowered space for women. Obviously, Guerrilla Girls, Mickaleen Thomas, Betty Saar. And then there are those who are pivoting to your point of scale, you know, the scale shifts that might include taking space, such as Emily Brown, who I mentioned before, who tends to work very large. She's making landscape paintings, and very large, very beautiful. And Vija Kelmans, who works tiny, really small, very microscopically. Mia Rosenthal also works on the, you know, microscopic level. So those are making statements of scale. So talk about that a bit, because I thought that was very interesting to open it up to a discussion of politics and scale.
Yeah. And the Emily Brown one is an interesting one, because believe it or not, we didn't choose one of the bigger Emily Brown works, which is we chose a beautiful, I think I shouldn't say that, but I think we chose a really beautiful piece by Emily that, as far as I know, it hasn't been up since I've been there, but it's a shadow image of her, which is a portrait. So some of those, so in the case of Emily, it was more about sort of taking space, putting yourself in that artwork and taking space in that way. But I think that the, you know, Mia's work in the show is all about the Hadron Collider. So it was a piece that we had up in the Morris Gallery, I don't know, some 5 or 6 years ago at this point. But I think there's a buildup in gesture that happens, or build up in mark making is better a way to think about it, I think, in both Mia's work and Via Salmon's work, that I think, I don't know, gets you to a more expansive, even if it's more conceptual, place that's not about sort of physical size of the parameters of the piece, but more of that kind of build up, almost an obsessive kind of mark making thing. So I think we wanted to make the point that I think scale can mean a lot of different things. I mean, we have scale as a dimensional quality, of course, but there's something about scale, conceptual scale, even maybe is the way to think of it, or that expansiveness as well. But I think that you're right in catching on that there's a variety in what politics means to these artists, And to me, that's one of the really great qualities of the show. Something that I had to learn very early on in my work with women artists is thinking about how we all and a lot of the artists have very complex and different views on feminism. And so I mean, Joan Brown is someone, for example, who we have an incredible self-portrait by her in the exhibition that is essentially a parody of what people think a female artist is. So it shows Joan Brown in like a 1950s cocktail dress in high heels, painting a dainty still life of a flower in gloves, you know. And then you look on the floor and there's just paint everywhere. So that's the clue of this is how Joan Brown really worked on the bottom here. But then, oh, good, yes. And then we've got this parody of a female artist. But, you know, whereas I look at this work and I think how incredibly feminist it is from my perspective, Joan was of a generation and of a time, and her own personal choice was to sort of more act as a feminist rather than be sort of political about it. So I think we did make some, you know, I would say, I don't know. I mean, we didn't talk to every artist and ask them, are you a feminist? But I think there's a variance in that approach and their relationship to it. And I hope that actually makes people realize how even complicated the idea is that we have a show of only women artists. Like, what does that even mean? You know, Brittany talks a lot about the Helen Molesworth quote, which I don't know if we have, so I'm sorry for putting you on the spot about this, Brittany, but about what it means to be a feminist curator or to lay out a show in a feminist way. So, you know, what's the relevance of having a group show of only women? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Like, I think, and Brittany, I don't know. I feel like we're kind of open to that consideration and criticism too. Because we talked a lot about what that meant, about it being a female only show and orienting that in that way.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that makes this really interesting is I think Jodi and I both self-identify as feminists. And so we have taken feminist readings of works in ways that it's possible the artist didn't necessarily intend. But we also are being really expansive about what we imagine feminism looks like in museum practice. And so I think about the many iterations of this show, that there were earlier versions of this show where at first we were thinking we were just taking large scale work, only the biggest, most ambitious pieces. And then we thought about the politics of, you know, maker space and studio space and who that would leave out if we think about the fact that, you know, studio space is part of an artist practice that is linked to a political economy that does not always benefit women. So what does it look like to decide that women who have made work that is ambitious in other ways, that isn't necessarily about making the largest possible painting, who does it leave out? People who don't have access for economic reasons or geographic reasons to the space that allows them to make large scale work, or the space that allows them, or the money that you need to afford those kinds of materials. And so to think expansively about politics, like the politics of political economy, the politics of arts education, if we're sort of taking our cues from artists who are thinking about those things in their work, even if it's not in artist statements or even if it's not signaled in the title of the work. There are interviews where people talk about this, and they talk about the ways that they've navigated through this. The idea that making work about domesticity is not necessarily a small thing, that can be read as a large, ambitious practice. What are our sort of feminist impulses around apprehending that work as just as important or just as interesting or just as intellectually rich as other kinds of works that have been read differently in arts and institutional spaces. And so this Helen Molesworth essay, How to Install Art as a Feminist, is something that we've been thinking with, you know, this question of what does it mean to take women's absence in museums as the very historical condition under which the work of women artists is both produced and understood. And we are also thinking about the ways that that work has been produced and misunderstood, and what opportunities we have in this exhibition that's thinking about the politics of space, the politics of scale, the politics of making, the politics of what it looks like to produce ambitious work as an artist, what we could do with that in an institution. And I also want to sort of signal the fact that this is a permanent collection show. We're also thinking about the politics of institutional history building. What does it look like to have this be a show where we are committed to showing works that we have a responsibility to steward the care and the long-term sort of health, both physically and intellectually, to not do a show where we've invited a ton of loans or a lot of temporary works that will be in our galleries on view temporarily, and then sort of get dispersed, and in some cases lost to history. You know, there is a history of that in art history. What's our responsibility as curators to sort of push against that tide to make it possible for, 50 years from now for people to be thinking with very different kinds of artworks and very different kinds of historical legacies? What can we do to sort of push against that right now?
I really like what you said, and it makes me think the show has a universality to it also in its largeness that goes really well with our time right now of inclusivity, the need for inclusivity, and pointing to the future. So a show that points in a direction like this is an example, you know?
That's lovely. I love that. I love to think that could happen.
Yeah, I think it could. You guys got to seize the space and take it, move it
There
that
you go.
way.
You're right.
So do you want to say anything more about the show? What else are you excited about in the show before I get to a couple of questions about PAFA in general?
Yeah. I mean, not to belabor the permanent collection point, but that's something that I think we feel super, super proud of. Because I cannot remember, 85%, Brittany, is that right? 85% of the work in the show was collected over the last 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
So I hope, I don't know that that's what people will walk away from knowing, that we're committed to this, and it's important to us that they're not one-off shows, that women artists have a legacy at PAFA, and we're really proud of that.
How about you, Brittany? Anything to add about the show in particular that you love and are so proud of? And
I mean, I think I love how expansive it is. I love it's visually stunning. I will say that in this roller coaster of a year that we're having, even installing the show has been a bit of a bright spot. I think it's been, there are a million ways 2020 has been a very difficult year in the world, in this country, in the city of Philadelphia, and in our sector. And thinking about just what it feels like to stand in the galleries looking at work as it's being installed, I think we have been feeling the ways our eyes have been a little bit starved for looking at work by artists this year, engaging artists this year. There's this gorgeous metal sculpture by Allison Schatz that's being installed in Tuttleman Gallery that is just a stunning piece to think with, what it is to make sculpture out of a heavy material like metal, but suspended from the ceiling in a way that it's meant to be sort of light and reflective visually. Like that duality is really fascinating to think with, that if you think of large scale installation metal sculpture, when somebody calls that up for me, I think Richard Serra. And so to see an artist take on large scale metal sculpture and to make it so light that it lifts off the floor, that it reflects the light in the room, across the room, is sort of shimmering, and it's almost soft, you like want to touch it or push against it. It doesn't feel like a monument in the way that we think of large scale sculptural monuments. It feels like something you want to engage with, you almost want to move with it. And that kind of, even just getting to take that in visually, to sort of stand in front of it, like, wow. I mean, there's a kind of breath of fresh air that we need in 2020. And I also think that there are things that does for us in thinking about ways that artists are always reimagining our approaches to how we're thinking about the material physical conditions that we live in. And we absolutely need to be doing that kind of thinking in 2020 to be sort of forward facing, future thinking. There's a way that kind of becomes, I don't know, sort of philosophically exciting. What does it feel like to sit with artists and think about all the ways that we can reimagine the material physical conditions of our lives right now?
Wow. Yeah. Are you guys, this is for both of you, are you optimistic about the future of museums in general? We're in a really hard space right now where museums are having to rethink their budgets because of recession, management of the collection, how to interact with the community. It's hard. So are you optimistic? What do you think?
I mean, yes, I'm optimistic, but there's a lot of work to do, you know? In some ways, I think that what's happening has only brought it out in full view in a way. Like, I think that there's a lot of us that maybe we're trying to do work in our small way the best we can. I mean, it could always be better, and we could always improve, certainly, and listen more. But I think the really great thing that's happened, frankly, that maybe makes me more optimistic is that I think it's also hit a different level of awareness. And that's at the board level. That's also at the press level, where people are paying more attention to what museums are doing. So, you know, in dark, and these kind of, when I go down a hole, because there were moments this summer definitely where I was feeling less optimistic. You know, I try to say that maybe it means that people are paying more attention to museums, you know. I'm hoping that means that people still see value and want museums to pull through. But there's a lot of hard work to do at every single level of most organizations, I think, to make some big changes. And I think, you know, in the 21st century, a lot of that is, and make big changes fast. Which is harder to do. I don't know what you think, Brittany.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think the fact that there are, we're having sort of larger conversations, and by larger, I mean there are more people participating in the conversations. They're happening in more spaces, the space of the press, the space of museums themselves. People are talking about these things on social media. I think that this is a reflection of, you know, a push that's been happening for a long time. And so there's a kind of optimism to the fact that no one is really in a position to pretend this conversation isn't happening anymore, which maybe wasn't the case 20 years ago. I also think that there are more, you know, when we say institutions have a lot of work to do, I'm always thinking, you know, we are institutions. If you are a member of a museum, you are part of that institution. If you work in a museum, you are part of that institution. That means that we all have a lot of work to do, but thank God there are so many of us who actually want to do it and are willing to do it. And there are so many things that you can do as a member or a visitor, as a staff member, as a constituent, as an arts lover, to take on that work of an institution, not just sort of pushing against it, but if you imagine yourself to be in collaboration with an institution or in collaboration with a community, there are a ton of things you can do. And so we're also lucky, I think, in this exhibition to have, you know, a little less than half of the works that are in the permanent collection on view in Taking Space were gifts to the collection. And I don't think that people think about the politics of that. But there is something that you can have powerful, I think, are exhibiting that folks have had powerful impact on what's possible for an institutional collection and what's possible for an exhibition by gifting work that maybe an institution wouldn't have otherwise been interested in. And that also, I think, sort of speaks to this moment of recession, sort of what does it look like to think about the future of collections if you have small budgets? And I think that there's a way that, you know, we're lucky to be in community with so many passionate art lovers, art collectors, stewards of art in their own sort of communities and lives, that have worked with us in this way that benefits, I think, everyone. That's one small way that I think individuals can have major impact on what the future of museum work can look like.
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about the, Linda Lee Alter's gift, she gave her collection is all art by women. She gifted that to PAFA. You think about the Sorgenti family and the collection of work by African American artists that they gave to PAFA. This was, excuse me for not knowing exact time periods, but 10, 15 years ago. And that set the path for, frankly, the work that we're doing. So those gifts and subsequent gifts too, and frankly, things as well that now big museums are really excited to have, but at the time when these things were gifted, I think PAFA was adventurous in saying, yes, we do want this work that no one else was looking at, that now, we're so fortunate to have.
And, as a museum and an art school, I think we're always thinking about students and students as people who, as arts makers and as future arts historians, will be the next phase of what this field looks like. All that work feels really important. So it means that our young artists, our young makers and scholars are getting to study this work in the collection, on view in exhibitions, thinking with faculty and thinking with curators about what's important, that if I can go back to what we love about that Deb Willis lithograph, what would it have looked like for her if her experience of art school had been with this kind of collection, with these kinds of shows, and with these kinds of, young feminist curators who were sort of pushing this work as the kind of work we want to see in the field might look differently. And I mean, I thank God that she wasn't pushed out of it, but we also want to be part of creating a world where no one is being pushed out of the field at these sort of early points. And this is one way we think we can sort of push at that.
This is a conversation I would like to extend for another hour and a half, but I think we can't do that. Thank you so much, Brittany, Webb, and Jodi Throckmorton, for talking with me. This has been an Artblog Radio delight. And thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alberta Gibson, Parks and Rec, District 6. Always mask up. All right, today we're going to talk about a simple project that you can do with the children. You just fold the paper into 4 parts. Okay, this is called the totem pole. And you can do a lesson about totem poles if you'd like beforehand to explain why you have totem poles. So it says air, just say it, earth, water, and a family symbol on the bottom. Okay. So for air, some children will come up with things that you're not thinking of. Like I had one little boy, he said, oh, a helicopter. Let him go with it if that's what, they want to do. Something in the air. It doesn't have to be nature. It can be nature. It can be clouds. So we're just going to do, it's pretty simple. You just give them color pencils, markers. It works great with markers. I'm just using my own set of pencils. But it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You could use crayons too. So what I'm going to do is just do the clouds. Okay? And that represents my totem pole of air, right? Okay, that's air. And the earth, maybe they could do, I don't know, they could even do dirt with a flower in it, maybe. You could do whatever you're comfortable with doing. So I'll do a flower with dirt. Or some people did cougars. I've seen people put dogs because it's an animal that's on the earth. So like I said, there's no wrong way to do this. It's kind of fun. Let them express themselves, use their imaginations. The idea is to get them thinking, to get their minds working. Okay, so that is for earth. Okay, and water, what can we put for water? Maybe a big fish? Dolphin would be nice, huh? And like I said, you can make it as colorful, elaborate if you want. They could even paint it. I tend to do this with markers with the children though, because it's very easy. It's a quick setup. You don't need a whole lot of different things. All you need is pencils or something colorful to do. And the whole trick is just folding the paper in the beginning into fours. Okay, that's for water, the fish. Okay, and then the last thing that you want to talk to the children about is the symbolization for their family. What's a symbol? Oh, what's a symbol? I always ask the kids and say, oh, and one kid will, raise their hand. Oh, a stop sign. That's a symbol. Yeah, that's a symbol. Octagon. What's another symbol? Usually, at least one child will say a heart. Yeah, that's a symbol too. So you want to discuss with them and teach them exactly what the word symbol is. And then you tell them to make something that identifies their family, makes their family special. What's something you like to do with your family? One child said, we listen to music together. Another child said, we watch TV. We do Game Boy or the Xbox, things like that. And they drew a controller, So it's up to the child. It's up to the family. What do they think about their family? So for me, what I like to always do is to just think about it. Let me see, family symbol. I think I'm going to pick a heart for lots of love in our family. And I'm also going to draw, which I did this one time. I was away to a special training up in the mountains. And what I drew, and a lot of people couldn't understand at first why, I did a pigeon. And the reason I did a pigeon is they're very versatile and they can survive. They're survivors like me and my family. So I always thought that a pigeon was a really cool symbol. And a lot of people came over and said, why are you doing that pigeon? What is that? But I think they're very versatile and they definitely survive a lot. So that I chose to be my family symbol. And you could put more than one thing. As you see, I'm doing the pigeon and the heart. It's a funny looking pigeon. There. Like, keep it simple. Okay? It's just very simple. I don't know if you can see the heart. Maybe I need to make the heart a little bit darker. So you could color it in. Like, you can make it real dramatic. You can make designs, stars, hearts, flowers, whatever strikes you to do. So I'm just going to color in my heart red. Very traditional. Does it have to be traditional? No, it doesn't have to be. Okay? It doesn't have to be traditional. It could be whatever you want it to be. Okay? There goes. Like I say, it's not fancy. Keep it simple. Keep it nice. And the kids enjoy this. And, oh, I have to show you my heart. Here we go. Okay, so this is the totem pole. And when you do it with the kids, of course, you're going to add more color. You could add glitter. You could just get dramatic with it and add the pom-pom balls they have. You could add pieces of wool, pieces of ribbon, done in all different ways. So just your imagination, the sky's the limit. Enjoy it. Have fun with it. And I'm Alberta Gibson, and I'm from District 6, Philadelphia Park and Rec. Make it count and make it great. I know you can. Peace and love. Bye for now.